Time waits for no person. Good morning, Trumptopia. It's Friday, December 18th, 7:10 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. On today's show, time is money. Or so they say. And now, please welcome your host, the incorrigible Mr. Zeppo. Namaste and welcome, folks, and/or thank you for welcoming me into your sanctuary of inner silence. Through speaker or earphones or what have you. Here we are together again, once more, as if for the very first time, to totally not accurately correctly quote, but sort of intentionally want to reference the jazz album. What a whirlwind week of crazy it has been. But then again, one has been quite legitimately capable of saying that every week of 2020, even if you had next to nothing going on for you, in all other respects of life, right? Like, even if you had the most boring of week, any week this year, it was still surrounded by a cacophony. How do you pronounce that? I'm suddenly quite paranoid that I have no idea how to pronounce that word, especially here in your dimension. For in my dimension, we say words slightly differently sometimes. Didn't we all realize that's a thing that happens? The great science thingy in Switzerland, that they were all protesting so hard about before they turned it on, the giant hadron collider thing. I'm sure it's got a much more proper name than whatever I just said, but it has yet to destroy the world with a, evil satanic portal to the nether regions or a black hole or whatever. Perhaps they are the same thing. No, I don't. I have a very specific idea about what black holes are. And they're not evil portals to some nefarious, dark, demon-filled dimension. I don't I don't believe. And then, I don't know. I also have no idea, right? I'm not an astrophysicist. But I am the host of this show. And what a week, folks. And this entire time, it should be noted that whatever other minuscule amount of work that Congress has done, because no offense, whatever else you can say about Congress, they have worked next to record-breaking levels of almost doing nothing this year. In natural progression and evolution to the overt and publicly announced and cannot be taken back conscious obstructionism that they entertained for 8 years as your representatives. They are now, quote, working really hard. And I'm not entirely sure what that means. And I don't mean to disparage or demean anybody, but abstractly speaking, they seem to strive, they appear to strive to do the least amount of work possible and pay themselves what to many people sounds like exorbitant amount of money. Right? For the amount of work and the amount of vacation and travel time that they get out of it, etc., etc. And that delightfully, gloriously better than anybody else's in the country's healthcare plan that they have, that they get for free, the way that they say is bad to get. It's evil. It's evil when you get free healthcare. What? So today's show, I don't know, is it too little too late? I've always felt, and I want to say that I may or may not have successfully achieved, or maybe I sound like a broken record. I don't know. But I don't feel like I've achieved being outspoken enough that the response at a national level, and I can really only speak for here, but I think that in the early days, one could sort of look around at the whole world's response and go, what are you guys doing? Why are you choosing these things? And that should be fair and valid, right? I shouldn't have to walk on eggshells about that. Weird choices were made, friends, that caused odd consequences. But never mind that. That was months ago. In ye olde ancient times. We are now, in the context that we find ourselves, caught between a really weird... It's almost hard not to laugh. No offense to anybody who would get butthurt. I'm not trying to be rude. I know that it's quite easy to perceive me as trying to be rude, but I just see the world and have to ask, like, why? But this particular nexus of all these different influences, not the least of which is Trump's own weird, bizarre inadequacies as a president and as a sort of American mogul / celebrity / supposed super rich millionaire playboy, whatever he is, whatever he was, reality TV show host struggling with ever increasing amounts of foreign mystery debt. I don't know. I can neither confirm nor deny that I find that hilarious. Judge for yourself. Don't judge me, though. I'm just the messenger of one perspective of looking at it. We should laugh a little bit, because it is a bit comical. I mean, you can't deny that this... You know how I said a few episodes ago, or like maybe just this last episode, that nobody got the question right, like, where do you see yourself in 5 years? Like, I don't, anybody imagine this? Probably not. I love that meme. Meme maker unknown. I love that meme though, and that question, as, you know, who cares, right? A meme is ultimately truly a meme when it transcends all boundaries and it becomes universally respected as just an institution of its own right. I think. Isn't it? Aren't we? I don't know. Are we in what's the word? Agreement? It's okay to disagree. We just don't need to get all crazy about it, right? We are in a remarkably strange place. And I've got opinions about how we might manage our reaction collectively. One is to focus on holding their feet to the immediate fire of, like, you can't dangle a cliffhanger emergency government shutdown thing and also go, I don't know about helping you guys out, Congress. Whatever, and I don't know if public outcry and public outrage targeted folks, don't just go to Facebook and post something on Facebook to your Facebook friends. Unless your friends circle of friends, your sphere of influence in Facebook directly includes, and you are being followed by most of Congress, particularly Eminem, as I like to call him in my mind. Is his mystery hand discoloration been magically healed by some sort of alien technology and or robot implants? Like, what's going on? What was up with that? How come the only bit of coverage I saw about it anywhere on any of the channels was people going, we don't know, what's going on? It's really weird. How is that not something that the press urgently pressed him on and asked him for, like, what's up? What does your doctor say? Is it a good thing that your hands just keep getting more and more discolored as if you're a rotting corpse? I wasn't accusing him of anything. It was just curious and alarming, and as a human being, I worried for him about the question whether or not he is a human being. Because, you know, usually I dismiss... Because here we are, right? We're at the end of 2020. The clusterfuck shitstorm of conspiracy, again, whatever else is going on. Let me tell you what I noticed that was really alarming and weird and hilarious about this year, if I may. And I don't mean to be rude, you guys. If you're a fervent believer in conspiracy theories, I love you as a human being. You just got to stop. It's like being addicted to, I don't know, something really silly that's just not necessary in your life that might be fun. And it might be entertaining. And it might even be a little enlightening in the sense that it helps you realize a few things that you didn't realize without anybody pointing them out to you. But most of the content is garbage, in my humble opinion. After 30 years of kind of looking through it going, what is all this other garbage? And by garbage, I mean neurolinguistic programming, ideological manipulation, and, you know, the fomentation of violence through indoctrination of weird things that don't make sense that basically just drive wedge issues deeper. But, you know, call me crazy. Or call me the crazy guy calling for national and international, state by state, community by community, household by household, individual by individual, Gandhi-like pacifism and healing. And, you know, if, like, Gandhi was Jesus and Superman combined. Imagine that. Just sit there and imagine that. What does that have to do with Trumptopia and our Congress? Absolutely nothing. And a little bit of everything. But, as I'm trying to stick to that tighter format, I'm going to hand things over to the ever resiliently stoic DJ Zed. And a song I hope I haven't played way too recently, called Coils Sprung Deep Dawn? Is that what it's called? Or is that a typo? Did I just play the song, he says? with a look, with the glaring, gleaming robot eyes. Ah, yes. There's nothing like a bit of digitally abrasive, supposedly danceable music in your ear holes to cleanse the palate of thinky thoughts and pause the world. Did I do that right, or is it playing? Did it stop? It stopped. So if I push that, if I do that, it's not playing anymore? Good. Okay. So, friends, listeners, internet fam, but most especially those of you stuck here in the milieu of this critically weird roller coaster ride through what is normally a quite mundane transition process. But you know, it wouldn't be 2020 without roller coaster ride craziness. I want to take a moment to acknowledge the real life suffering out in the world. There are Americans in food bank lines and, you know, soup kitchen lines, etc. And that's a very real thing, and it's causing a lot of pain and a lot of stress. And I don't want to talk past that. There's also a lot of reasonable outrage. In other words, a lot of reasonable people have reasonably come to some stressed out outrage over the situation and the fact that Congress that Congress did what it did the way that it did it. That the world has done what it did the way that it did it. But particularly here in Trumptopia. It's, you know, kind of shocking, and it's all interconnected. Like, there's a reason why America is number one in all the scary numbers. And I don't know that conspiracy theory content has an easy answer for that. Other than it's some kind of attack being orchestrated by some sort of outside, you know, opposition force. But it can't be all the different things all at once. And they all claim absolute truth, right? And I don't pretend to know the truth. And I don't really like to bet money. I'm not a wagering man. I'm not the kind of guy that runs off. No offense to anybody who loves it. Do your thing. People spend their money wherever they want, right? It's their money. That's freedom, I suppose. But like I was saying, there's a lot of reasonable outrage for being in the situation that we are in. And there's a lot of people outraged at a lot of different levels in a lot of different ways. And one big sort of chunky flavor of that outrage is outrage at those who have issued the strongly worded suggestions and or recommendations that we follow certain protocols for the mitigation of transmission, right? And put a pin on the problem. There's a problem with the vaccine, and it isn't, I'm not referring to in this moment what conspiracy theory stuff might refer to. Some of which has legitimacy. Not all of it. I don't know that there's donkey alien DNA in every single vaccine. Why are there alien donkeys in every spaceship? Kind of stretches the imagination. Or I'm trying to be funny. But I don't know that there's alien DNA. Donkey or otherwise. And I try to take the most reasonable, plausible path possible. And I'm not saying that that it isn't possible that there's aliens out there. I don't want to go off on that tangent. Put a pin in that. And the other thing. And the thing before it. Whatever that was. It's all on tape. If I may be so bold, my dear fellow Trumptopians, outrage is right. When managed healthily, with a little dose of compassion all around for yourself and everyone involved, and an understanding that it should be transmuted, which you can think of that as shifting gears. If you experience yourself suddenly outraged, think of that as a signal that you're full of energy and you need to shift gears, which, energetically speaking, could mean something like pointing that energy and doing something productive about your situation. Not just screaming and yelling and spewing hate and spreading the sort of viral hate energy, which is a whole ego trap in and of itself and a problem. That doesn't help. It doesn't solve anybody else's problem. It doesn't alleviate anybody else's suffering. Just being angry that things are the way they are. Threatening to kidnap and or do other horrible things to elected officials is a terrible idea. I'm fairly certain against the law on the face of it, right? And I never have and never will, never could imagine actually issuing that sort of statement. I'm addressing it that it's been done. Like, this is that kind of year. And that others are kind of fomenting about that sort of stuff. And while I respect free speech, there are limits, and we got to acknowledge that, and we got to sort of like, hey, remember? And it's not just free speech. Like, we've got free will, but we also set boundaries, right? In my humble opinion, if I may be so bold, one way to direct that outrage that doesn't involve, getting into outrageous, disorganized, or organized violence, is to focus on it, holding them accountable. Not that they've asked us to stay home. I mean, if we don't choose to be super wicked offended by that, and they did it right, it wouldn't be so horrible. Then again, if the world had responded to this better, more correctly, and in less of a messed up, stupid, get people worked up and riled up and angry at each other kind of way, we might have, shoulda, coulda, woulda, theoretically can have had, is that even real? Theoretically could have had executed the kind of solidarity, because it requires that. Solidarity anchored, really thorough risk reduction, infection mitigation stuff from, all the things we've been hearing about and talking about and discussing back and forth. In a more intelligent way, in a way that wasn't like abusive of those who were nowhere near it and annoyed that they couldn't go about their business because it was only impacting, the whole scenario. And in a way that was funded. I mean, other countries did much better, right? I'm not trying to shitpost the entire world, but still, right? If there was ever a cosmically opportunity, there was ever like a perfectly aligned moment to sort of address poverty in Trumptopia, it could have, might have, should be vis-a-vis the lens of how do we help those who are on the fringes and the most vulnerable in a way that's sustainable, reasonable, and doesn't break the bank, obviously, and isn't a nanny state and or a prisoner psyops socialist state, whatever the fuck, but is actually, I don't know, maybe, is this crazy sounding? Maybe borrowing from market terminology, what if instead of neglecting, abusing, throwing away, and incarcerating the marginalized, the poor, the unfortunate, those who have, drawn the worst lot in life, to borrow a phrase, and instead we invested in them, we invested in their well-being, we invested in their health, we invested in their housing, we invested in their, basic fundamental education, invested in their basic tool set, and applied that approach, I don't know, to everybody that makes under $90,000 a year. I mean, if you're breaking 90, you're doing okay, unless you are really, really, really irresponsible with everything and you're juggling a million things you shouldn't be juggling. But, to the best of my understanding, over $100,000 a year, even in a single head of household, one person makes that income. That's like the American dream, right? That's the hello, entry level, you're no longer a peasant, American dream, right? And then you go up from there. And instead of vilifying everybody who doesn't make $100,000 a year, why don't we address all the obstacles and roadblocks? I mean, given this current situation as an example, if, especially here, if in the United States, instead of politicizing masks and playing this game of calling it a hoax, whatever it is, people are getting sick and dying. And despite all the arguments to the contrary, the mitigation factors prove capable of not just flattening or bending the curve or whatever the fuck the terms that got all trendy were, but as I was pointing out, it's an animal that's alive and that is driven by needs. And if you starve it, it falls over dead. Simple as that, right? If they just paid us to stay home and paid us to a nice enough amount so that, because think about it, I'm not judging anybody. Everyone who's utilizing their free speech to protest, ironically, because they're all kind of generally mostly over there on the Trump side, and the Trump administration defined the parameters of the lockdowns, opening back up horizons, right? The different levels and all that, and the extremity of it, that was all them. And the absence of a financial aid solution, where does the buck stop? He's trying to shovel it onto the states, And there is an argument to be made that they all wiffle batted it, the states, even the ones that did a, quote, good job. There's a lot you could afford to criticize. Not to get all mean or anything or hypercritical, but I try not to be a judgmental person, but I do try to be a realist. You know, everyone could have done all of this differently. Everyone in quote, authority and attached to government. And I say this with love and respect, right? Like, why did we fumble it so hard? Also, I think that we fumbled it so hard. I think that if I may be so bold, put a pin in your outrage, right? Oh, well, don't put a pin. Let's finish that thought. That outrage can be directed at the fact that they've put their own feet on the fire. They're playing this game of government shutdown cliffhanger. Can we negotiate an agreement that we can agree to and keep the government moving? That's just like fundamental, like, busy work of running the operation that is known as Congress. They should be able to do that without hyper-politicizing it and making a big hoorah about it, and having the whole thing teeter on making it feel like the world's going to end. But who am I, right? What do I know about what a pain in the ass it is to approve? They're essentially approving at a certain level, if you think about it, they're approving the ongoing necessity to continue to draw a paycheck from the job that they're, quote, doing. And, you know, everybody else that's along for the ride, in that when the government stays open, lots of people stay employed. And whatever else you can throw as a critique to government, it's a big chunk of employment. And we do believe in jobs, right? Or, I mean, I don't know. Maybe we believe that there are people out there arguing that we've evolved past jobs. And there's a big giant pin on the board for that. But I think it is, and as we transition through this, because things are going to get better, right? We are at this awkward juncture of record-breaking vaccine deployment. And, okay, anybody who's over there on the we don't trust the government, but we trust our research that we do, hasn't researched the vaccine and the history of development, because, you know, they didn't develop this vaccine in 9 months or 3 months or a month or whatever they are claiming in all the disparaging content. And I'm not a blind faith defender, right? Keep in mind. But I'm going to call out what seems going to be out there that's kind of a little bit off base, because, as I said before, research into a vehicle that would apply to the interesting variety of viruses that exist in the family of COVID viruses. As, you know, other viruses belong to other families, right? You know, the tree of life, et cetera, et cetera. So there's just so many double whammies. You know, like, it tickles me pink that a big chunk of the base is anti-vaxxer, and Trump is super proud and you know, taking victory laps for Operation Warp Speed and pushing the vaccine, while also failing to give the first company, which is what, Pfizer, I believe? I could be wrong. But failing to give them further instructions as to deployment of more doses, even though what the world needs now is not a Coca-Cola. I mean, it certainly needs love, but if the vaccine is real and it really works, and the disease is real and it's really killing people, then the world needs the vaccine. Duh. We're what? In the first week or so of deployment of the first different pair, because there's all this local talk about, what is it, Pfizer and the other one, Madura. I don't remember. I'm terrible at names. I apologize. Even though I hear them 1,000 times a day. I have a sticky note for my own name because I forget how to spell it. Kind of a true story. But I digress. Globally, there's there's several vaccines being developed, and there's other vaccines, like the one that got deployed in England is different than the one that got deployed here. Now, they're all kind of crossover, eventually going to all get approved everywhere, I suppose. But as of right now, this hot minute, the big scandal, or whatever, the big critique is that Pfizer's a little miffed that the Trump administration's trying to throw shade at them for having gaffes in their deployment, supposedly, when they're like, no, bro, we've got these millions of files on the shelf, and you didn't tell us where to distribute next, and you said, hold up, we'll tell you where to distribute next. That's me paraphrasing and putting it into my own words, what I heard on the grapevine. Wacky. This whole time, if I was going to take a really cynical, and the following is a purely theoretical statement, I'm not trying to disparage anybody, but if I was going to take the most cynical view possible, it would seem to me as though everyone, including Donald Trump, who's supposedly fighting for whoever he's fighting for, he's not, right? Everyone is doing their utmost to play the game of appear to be fighting each other over the most best way to respond, while also allowing enough shenanigans that's all set up and designed to sort of gently push as many people to get sick as possible, while allowing for the and I don't like using this term because it's really loaded and heavy-handed, and it's often used with very snide sort of judgmental hate-ism for the whole world. But there's a little bit of cognitive dissonance to be anti-vaxxer, pro-Trump, hating the medical industry, hating the governors for doing what Trump asked the governors to do, believing that the disease is still a hoax, but, watching people in Trump's own administration get sick and die, or get very severely hospitalized, or get sick in quarantine. I mean, even if they're not expressing any symptoms, they're taking it seriously enough to quarantine, even though they've been calling it a hoax. That makes no sense. I don't even want to get started on the little tiny awesome stupid crazy can of worms that was Trump going to the hospital when he got COVID and then taking a victory lap. I don't know what was up with that. There's so many things, so many questions, but and there's so many distractionary. You could be outraged that it's nanobots being controlled by 5G. You could be outraged, that's a highly improbable thing to be outraged. And ultimately, honestly, there's nothing you can do about it. If it is nanobots being controlled by 5G, we're fucked. Out one ear, through the other, nanobots are in our blood. They're going to eat our brains. Hopefully it doesn't hurt too much. What are you going to do about it? I mean, even I feel hopeless against that one, because I don't think meditation's going to do much about it besides maybe let me see the nanobots internally with my chakra eye if I ever open it. But then again, I guess if I did that, I could control them with my psychic powers. Meditate harder. No, in setting aside all the nonsensical things and the overtly like, oh, that's designed to distract you kind of things, if I may be so bold to suggest that the proper application of outrage now is to hold them accountable, right? Say, hey, y'all didn't do jack enough shit. You misapplied and let a lot of leaking happen with the first big giant overdose. You could have taken that whole first package, divvied it up a different way, and every American that's now currently suffering and stressed the fuck out and facing the unfaceable, which is the American dream being stripped away from them through no fault of their own, because everything was kind of just jamming along, paycheck to paycheck, survivability, with some comfort and convenience, until the government said, stop, there's this horrible disease. Now, the deniers irritate me because, I know people who've gotten sick personally from real life. And I get it. Maybe they got sick with something else and they were lied to and called it COVID. Well, then, effectively then that's just calling it by another name secretly. It's still a disease. And my point is, pressure should not let up. First off, kudos and congratulations to both sides, because I imagine both sides are turning out. Although, who knows, with that triple reverse, double, reverse psychology thing that they did to themselves with the Georgia election, I kind of hope that tons of red-based voters are like, screw this election, give it to them, it's rigged anyways, they're going to win anyways, and don't vote, and lets the Democrats win control of Congress. Not because I think they're saints or anything. God forbid I think that. I don't think anybody's a saint. Are you a saint? Mary Magdalene was a fucking saint. Is a fucking saint to put up with what we have done to the record of her. But that's a whole nother story. Whole nother episode. And I coulda, shoulda, woulda been speaking out a little bit harder, a little bit louder, a little bit sooner about this. But then again, it's a tired old shoe we've all been chewing on. Here's my extra bit I want to add. People should be calling Mitch McConnell. Get on the internet, get on the fancy app for being in touch. Facebook does it too. In Facebook, either on your phone or on a desktop, if you poke around enough in the menus of the menus you hardly ever look at, and in the little sub-menus under some of the see more stuff, you will find political, bipartisan, representative engagement support. But just Google Mitch McConnell. Google your representative. If you're out of the country and you're a citizen, do it. If you're out of the country and you're not a citizen, leave it alone. Just makes everything worse. Just stirs the pot. In my humble opinion. But, pray for them. Meditate for them. Send spiritual manifesting help. Excuse me, I've got the hiccups. There's time, we should not let them pat themselves on the back like they hit some home run out of the park with this. But there's time to make sure that they don't completely waffle and fail on this current, most recent, most upcoming quote-unquote relief package. But I think strongly and urgently and more importantly, and I know that they're already talking this, they're already speaking this speech. How would you say that? They're already talking the talk. But we got to make sure, as the coalition of people who wanted to make sure Trump was the one-term president, that the next president isn't stymied by the Republicans, because that's what they're going to want to do. If all things are equal, and what they're hoping out of Georgia is to keep leverage and control. All things being equal, they probably will, at bare minimum, never mind, set aside all questions about Trumpism surviving the end of this era. Whatever form the GOP presents itself in during the Biden-Harris administration, it will revert to its Obama-era obstructionism. And if it doesn't, I'll be shocked and amazed. Obviously, if they've got to deal with the Democrats as the slim majority leader because they just landslided in Georgia, and indications are pointing in a possibility that that's possible, as more Georgians, is that what they call themselves? More people from the Georgia state have turned out to vote in this current runoff round 2 of electing senators, which is sort of like an offshoot, than did in the original presidential election by all accounts. How are those dynamics playing out? Who knows? And I'm not going to aggressively watch all the pollsters. I am going to say that through that, keep that momentum, that turnout, that engagement. If I may cheerlead and support and applaud those who take voting seriously, because I think there's a question. We need to push the envelope about how seriously to take voting. And I'll be back to talk more about that sort of stuff in future episodes, dear friends. Remember, they asked you to stay home. Time is money. They shoulda, coulda, woulda been investing in your lost capacity to work over time so that you could be building something new, getting an education, etc., etc., etc. And most importantly, so that millions of Americans wouldn't be suffering the stress and the outrage and the fear of confronting the precipice of everything falling apart. But we'll have to leave it there, folks. But let those thoughts sink in, and remember that when as the first 90 days kick in after January 20th, Biden, Harris, and hopefully, not because I'm a blind faith Democrat, but because it'll just be a nice reprieve from the toxicity of GOP power hunger and thinking that they've got this control over everything and can deny, like I keep saying, folks, politics, as it is devolved recently, is truly a distraction from civic organization. And what this country needs is some serious civic organization and civic work. We all need to step up to a volunteer corps, get paid for it, a reasonable living wage, and fix the infrastructure and fix people's houses and build housing for the homeless and build hospitals for the sick, etc., etc., etc. And we're not doing it because the politicians are busy fighting over what? The virtual, vapid, obstructionary power of lording their power over one another is one way to... At any rate, may peace, love, and grooviness blossom in your hearts. Go Georgia!